I was driving cross country, exhausted but determined to make it to my destination before sunrise. It was just me and the endless highway. I hadn't seen another car for miles, and my eyes were starting to droop. That's when I saw the rest area. A small building lit by a single flickering light. I pulled in, grateful for the break. The place was eerily deserted, not a single car in the lot. It felt like a ghost town. The air outside was unnaturally cold, sending shivers down my spine. I told myself it was just the exhaustion making everything feel off. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Inside the restroom, the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered ominously. One of the stalls was closed, and I could see a pair of worn shoes beneath the door. They looked ancient. Thinking someone was already in there, I called out, my voice echoing eerily. "Hey, you good in there?" No response. Just an unsettling silence. I shrugged it off, assuming they were asleep or ignoring me. But a chill ran down my spine. I used the sink quickly, splashing cold water on my face to wake up, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. That's when I saw it, the shoes under the stall door. They turned, almost as if they were alive. Slowly, deliberately, they turned to face me, and my heart nearly stopped. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. Fear took over. My body moved before my brain could catch up, and I bolted out of there, my pulse racing. Outside, I paused to catch my breath, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. That's when I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. The parking lot was still empty. Too empty. No cars. No one. Just an oppressive silence. I glanced back at the building, dread filling my stomach. The restroom lights had gone out, and the stall door I'd seen was now wide open. I didn't dare go back. I got in my car and drove as fast as I could. The image of those shoes burned into my mind, haunting me. As I sped down the highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. There in the back seat, a shadowy figure sat, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. I screamed, swerving the car. But the figure didn't move, just stared. I floored the gas pedal, desperate to escape, but the shadow remained, a constant, terrifying presence. No matter how fast I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still with me, watching, waiting. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. Me and a group of friends road tripping across the country. We were young, carefree, and up for anything. But one night, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, we stopped at a gas station to fill up. That's when we saw her. A young woman standing off to the side, just barely visible in the dim light. She looked lost, scared even. One of my friends rolled down the window and asked if she needed help. She said her car had broken down and she needed a ride to the next town. Something about her didn't sit right with me. Her voice was too calm, her eyes too vacant. But the others insisted we couldn't just leave her there. So we agreed. She climbed into the back seat without a word and gave us directions. The drive was tense. She barely spoke, just stared out the window like she wasn't really there. Every time I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, I felt a chill run down my spine. But the real terror didn't hit until we reached the town. We pulled into the main street, turned to tell her we'd arrived, and she was gone. The seat was empty. We all froze, looking at each other in disbelief. There was no way she could have gotten out without us noticing. We asked a local shopkeeper if they'd seen a woman fitting her description. Their face went pale. She sounds like the girl who died out on the highway years ago, they said. People say she still wanders, trying to get home. I'll never forget the way my hands shook as we drove out of that town. The backseat felt colder than it had any right to be. And then in the rearview mirror, I saw her again. Sitting in the back seat, her eyes locking onto mine. I screamed, swerving the car. When I looked back, she was gone. But the chill remained, and I knew she was still with us. We drove in silence, the road stretching endlessly before us, haunted by the ghostly presence that refused to let us go. I was driving alone late at night, on my way back from visiting family. The gas gauge was nearly empty, and I had no choice but to stop at a station in the middle of nowhere. It looked run down, almost abandoned, but it was my only option. The attendant was an older man with a gruff demeanor, his eyes shadowed and unreadable. He seemed overly friendly, his smile not reaching his eyes, which only added to my unease. As I paid for the gas, he leaned in and said almost in a whisper, "Your back tire looks a little low. You should let me check it for you." A wave of paranoia washed over me. Something about his tone sent a shiver down my spine, like a cold hand gripping my heart. I politely declined, quickly heading back to my car, my steps hurried and anxious. As I started driving, I felt a fleeting sense of relief until I glanced in the rearview mirror. A shadowy figure was rising from the back seat, its form dark and menacing. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding, sending the figure tumbling forward. It was a man, wild-eyed and disoriented, his presence a nightmare come to life. He must have climbed into my car while I was inside paying, lurking in the shadows. My hands were trembling as I flung open the door and ran back to the gas station, fear propelling me forward. The attendant was already on the phone with the police, his face grim. He told me he'd seen the man sneak into my car, but couldn't say anything directly without scaring him off. His comment about the tire? It was a cryptic warning. The police arrived and took the man into custody, their lights flashing in the darkness. They told me I was lucky. That people like him don't always leave their victims alive. To this day, I double-check my back seat every time I get into my car, haunted by the memory. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel like I'm not alone, as if a shadowy figure is lurking just out of sight. And every now and then, in the rearview mirror, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure, watching, waiting. So what do you think? Are these just strange coincidences? Or is there something more out there, lurking in the shadows? Next time you're on the road, take a second look. That empty bathroom stall, the hitchhiker by the road, the shadow in your back seat. They might not be as innocent as they seem. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales that will leave you looking over your shoulder. And remember, sometimes the scariest moments happen when you least expect them.